Yo, what's up everybody? Super Milesio here. Boy, oh boy, it's been a while. How are you doing? I'm doing just fantastic, thank you for asking. I've heard a lot from you guys. You guys want to see me delve into this world that I've created in my very own room. I've seen a lot of people request that I do a logic breakdown session sort of thing, not totally unlike the ones that Jacob himself tends to do. About a week ago, I released my original arrangement on an old song called A Thing Called Love. And it was quite an endeavor, but it's not as gargantuan as some of the other projects I did, so I figured it would be a good way to just dip our toes in the water of logic breakdown sessions. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take it the logic session. Here it is. Boom, here we are in logic. This has been my home for quite a while, and why don't you call it your home for a little bit? Let's start off with the basics. Tracks. We're at 61 tracks, not nearly close to the hundreds that I know Mr. Collier himself has touched, but it's fair. We are now at a clean 490 regions. Not bad. So the best way I can think to do this is to just start from the beginning. What do I do when I start a project like this? Well, the first thing I do is figure out what I'm gonna do with my tracks. As you can see, I kind of have a meticulous way that I like to arrange them. They are all different colors, as I hope you are aware, based on your visual optics. For most of my vocals, I use something like a choir EQ, pretty basic, and then I might do a little low pass, low filter, just to get all those gross sounds out of there. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, there's maybe a little bit of stuff in here, but most of it's pretty standard. The compressor is basically what I use to make sure that I'm not overloading anything. And so when you have your microphone in here, what you can do, you look at this little number right here. What I usually like to try to do is I'll speak just at about the volume I would if I was singing. Woo, 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 woo. And ideally this number should not get above -12. And so if it does, you can lower this a little bit until you get the number that you want. So I always arrange my projects from top to bottom, meaning top is the highest note in the chord or whatever, and then as you go downward, you get to the lower notes. Pretty simple. Up here we have the melody. And the reason I divide it up like this is for sake of my own sanity, to look at it separated and organized, but also because different sections and different areas of my voice need to be processed and mixed a little bit differently, and this just makes it a lot easier. So we have the melody. This section, I call it treble. Maybe not the best, most accurate way to put it, but what I really mean by that is that all of these voices are gonna fall somewhere in the treble clef area usually, and mostly these voices are falsetto voices. So if I just only play this section, most of those are going to be higher voices, so that's pretty convenient to organize all those together. Then down here we have mids, which I could call them bass, as in bass clef, because that's where most of the notes fall. But that gets confusing because I actually have an entire section dedicated to the bass tracks themselves. So in here is most of those lower notes that are still in the chest voice range, but maybe a little bit higher. Pretty basic there. Then of course, we have the bass tracks, which is probably my favorite section overall. So pretty simple there. So that's how I like to organize things. Why do I do it like this? Well, as you can see, it's not just about the color. You can change the color of any track as you want just by selecting it and choosing color regions by tracks. For some reason, oh, well, I'm a little bit dumb, okay? What you can do, and I do this quite frequently, and I recommend you also do it, you can select multiple whoopsies. You can select, stop it. You can select multiple tracks. Useful little option. I can't do it because they're already in a stack. Look at that. Create track stack. And what that will do is actually organize them in their own little subfolder. That's why it says sub. And not only does this really reduce the clutter when you start getting crazy amounts of tracks, but it also allows you to isolate those areas and mix them independently of one another. So as you can see, if I just wanted to play the melody at any given time,
Foot 6 stood on the ground
without the other stuff,
200
very, very useful. You can obviously organize them in any way that makes sense to you. This is just how I do it. I have a section for the treble clef voices, a section for the middle voices, and an entire dedicated section for the bass tracks, and then of course on the top we have the melody. Hope I'm not going too fast for you. Let's relax a little bit. Let's expand it, and let's take this one little bit at a time. So now we're gonna start getting into actually how I got from the original song to this, and what are my processes for coming up with a cover like this. And I'll even sprinkle in a little bit of technical tips in there too, as much as that's worth from a person like me. So the first thing I did is get very familiar with the song that I'm working with, and I even imported it into the project right here, so it's just easily accessible for me. It's not like it doesn't sync up at all. I'm not copying anything. I'm just using it for inspiration.
6 foot 6 stood on the ground.
That's immediately there for me to reference if I want to. It's muted, of course, but there you go. So this first section is fairly simple. This is metronomic, and for the most part it sticks entirely to the metronome. I have plenty of pieces that don't actually do that as much, but this one certainly does. So this is a pretty interesting introduction. So what we have going on is sort of this counter stuff between the lower voices and the higher voices. So we have this ba 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 on all of the basic beats. As you can see, if I just play these, we have ba 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 ba. So I don't know if you can tell, but particularly in this project, which I haven't really done much in the old projects, I really focused heavily on panning. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term, panning basically means how far right or left you're gonna hear the audio. So if you're wearing headphones, you can control entirely how far right or left the sound ends up being. So as you can see, if you look at these little circles in these tracks, each one of them has a slightly different positioning. Some of them are dead center, some of them are actually based a little bit more to the left, some of them are to the right, and I did this on purpose right from the start. I just took a bunch of tracks, I duplicate them as I need, but for the most part I pan a lot, and I just have tracks that I can go to if I need that. So what we have here is to add on to this counter melody. So we have, you can see they're completely, it's a call and response thing, and to really amplify that, what I did was have these voices come in on one side, then we have these who come in on the left side. So that's that. And then of course the bass track is ripped straight out of the Oh, sorry, forgot to mention, if you're wondering why this sort of sounds a little odd, it does sound a little odd, I'll give you that. I actually transposed it myself because the original song is actually in the key of C. Big surprise there. So this is what the original sounds like. Then shifted it up so it would match what I was doing. Just a little tidbit there. You can do that. So we are in the key of D in this project. D, a wonderful, nice little bright key that I like to use sometimes, as you can clearly see. So this chord sets us up. It is a D9 major 7 sort of thing. There we have it. And here the melody comes in.
6'6", stood on the ground, weighed 200.
So, what I like to do in my songs, clearly this is a song with a lot of repeating verses. There's a chorus that's sprinkled in there twice. The first verse shouldn't throw too much too fast at you, and that's what I was trying to do here. You have the melody up here, and you have this higher melody that comes
Pounds, but I saw that giant of a man brought down to his knees by.
So we have that. The bass track is kind of replicating a bass, is what I tried to do here.
6'6", stood on the ground, weighed 235 pounds.
Not too much going on here. Then in these middle sections, what we have is you know, this sprinkling of. So we start out with just this simple major set or just dominant 7 in there. So again, this song is really emphasizing on the opposite side polarity there, the call and response. We have a lot of that. So we have. So there's quite a bit of that, which I really tried to capitalize on for this song. So after this first verse, we have this. Again with that D chord, we're gonna be hearing that a lot because at the end of everything, I mean it's pretty. It gets a little repetitive. That's why I switch it up. So at the end of every verse or whatever, it usually lands on this D chord. And so I try to make it a little bit different every time. And so this time there's more emphasis on the 9, which is that E. The bass is pretty much the same. And of course, not to get too off the rails, I don't know if you know about just intonation. If you don't, I won't go into depth in it. It's basically the third is always tuned a little bit off. So here is the first instance you're actually seeing flex pitch. If you guys know what flex pitch is, it's basically this mode in Logic that lets you micromanage manually every single note that you're singing. You can change things like the amount of vibrato you want. You can change the volume. You can change you can even like switch around the length of the notes. It's very, very useful. It is not auto-tune. It's not automatic pitch correction. It is a little bit of a help. I never use it to reach notes that are out of my range. And for the most part, I try to use it as sparingly as possible. But the thing is, when you have 60 vocal tracks going at the same time, you pretty much need everything to be in tune. And so that really helps fine-tune everything. I'll go ahead and show you how to get into it. If you just double-click on a track, or if you click this scissor icon in the top, it'll bring up your, what's it called? Editor, whatever. Then you can click this little tab here, make sure you're on flex pitch, and all these little circles here will let you alter things about the pitch. So if you take this, which track am I on? I'm gonna isolate this. Whoops, that's not correct. So if you have this G here, it's a little, I mean, I could literally do this and it wouldn't sound off. But that, of course, that's not the note that I want. And so, yeah, there's a lot you can do with it. Again, you can abuse this. You can make it sound so off to the point where it doesn't sound authentic anymore. And that's not the goal here. The goal is just to fine tune everything, make sure that it's not, if you end up like with something crazy, like you don't want that, so you can change it. And of course, this is also just to make sure that things like just intonation are right there locked in. I have perfect pitch. Listen, I have perfect pitch. That's just the way it is. Despite my perfect pitch, I cannot always sing at the crazy accurate pinpoint levels that Jacob Collier can. So if I want to do something like a just third, I might need a little bit of help. It's generally around 13 or 14 cents, which is actually very cool. So let me show you what this sounds like. So this, let me show you what it sounds like. It's gonna be pretty cool. Gotta warn ya. You ready? So that is just the regular third. So if you have, my point is, listen to this third. it's not quite in tune, and that really goes well with this bass. That is a perfectly in tune triad right there. Not to get too off the rails or anything, I'm sorry. I think now would be an appropriate time to mention that I do use a MIDI controller to help me out quite a bit. I don't actually have it plugged in now, so I'm not going to show you actually what it sounds like, but I have this over here. And what I can do is I don't even actually play it on the piano. It's just nice to have a MIDI controller when I need it. But I go into this, which is phenomenal. You can actually lay out entire chord structures, and you can hear what it sounds like. So if I just play you this is what it sounds like. Again, it looks very complicated, but it's really, if you know where the beat falls on the metronome, you can literally just create note, drag it where you want, and then figure out where on the beat it should fall. And that's what I do. So if I'm trying to construct a chord and I know what my bass is going to be, it's... right? So that's what I want. Then I can arrange these whole chords. This is actually what I ended up singing, but it's on the piano right now. Whoops. That is exactly what I sang. How do I get from this to the voice? Well, I lay out the structure. I see if it sounds right. What I typically will do is I pretty much always know what I want for the bass line. So I'll go ahead and write that out. That's about this. Then I'll come up with a complementary line slightly. I usually actually work from the bottom up when I'm doing stuff like this. I do some experimentation here. I actually did a little bit of a polyrhythm, so we have this triplet thing going here. We also have this straight up eighth note here thing going here, and you can hear that here. What we have with the bass note, we have dum ba dum 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 ba. So it's dum 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 ba. Then we have dum 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 ba. So we have dum 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 ba. And then that carries over into the other ones too. So you can hear that. That helps tremendously in things like that. I don't notate it on paper. I don't write the notes, even though I could do that if I spent the time to do it. I process it best by doing it in this way, and so I continued that on. So I did. So what I would do is I would play this with the melody to make sure it lined up. So we have.
He was the kind of man to gamble on luck, look you in the eye and never back up. But I saw him crying like a little whip pup.
So now that I had that, it was just a matter of taking each individual note that I had mapped out in the MIDI controller and singing it up here.
But I saw him crying like a little whip pup because of love.
So here we have the first instance where I'm actually singing, all of the vocal tracks are singing the same words. This is kind of a magical moment that I like to save for later. You know, a lot of Jacob Collier stuff, you'll start out with the verse and the melody. There's a bunch of rhythmic stuff going on in the background. It's not till you get to the later verses where every vocal track is pretty much singing the same words, which adds a lot of crazy stuff. So we have
But I saw him crying like a little whip
all of a
pup
sudden
because of love.
everybody's singing because of love, and that adds quite a bit.
Because of love. Wow, wow, wow.
So this is a pretty cool little section, so I'll just go into actually exactly what's going on here. So we have
Because of love. Because of love.
pretty standard here.
Whip pup. Because of love.
Right. Brazen man.
Pup. Because of love. Crying like a little. Because of love.
That's our, whatever.
Pup. Because of love.
This is one of my favorite parts. So we have beat because of love. I love that chromatic little.
Pup. Because of love.
That's a little bit, and again, justly tuned.
Pup. Because of love.
Love that clash there.
Like a little whip up because of love. Wow, wow, wow. Can't see.
We land on that. That is the end of the second verse. Now let's move on to the chorus. So what do I have here? Well,
See it with your eyes, hold it in your hand. Like the wind, it covers our land.
got that. What I did here is just arrange a sequence of...
Can't see it with your eyes, hold it in your hand. Like the wind, it covers our land.
So I actually didn't even have to map this out. I just sort of improvised this part, which is pretty cool that I've gotten much better at doing that. So what we have here is...
Dum, 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 ba-doo-doo, ba-dum, dum, doo-doo-dum, dum.
You can hear a little bit of harmony in there, which again, I didn't pull the harmony from the original, but I pulled the bass track. You can sort of barely hear the bass in there. I had to just pick it out by ear and transport it here and harmonize it myself. Then in here we have the chords. Then this is like one of my favorite parts that I did here. So what we have here is, again, everyone singing the same note for just a short period of time, or the same words.
Strong enough to rule.
Strong enough to rule. So that's the word here. Everybody's singing it. So what we have here is...
Strong enough to rule.
We have that.
Where's our land? Strong enough to rule.
That. Down here what we have...
Strong enough to rule.
So we have everything going at once.
Strong enough to rule.
That's quite a bit happening there. And I think it really works nicely with all these other stuff that's happening. Ooh, that is just... Now might also be a good time to mention, back when I said EQ, right? Another good reason for having things in folders like this is that you can EQ them separately. I actually have slightly different filters, but also EQ for the bass. As you can see, this section right here, which is kind of the prime area for vocal bass in this range, is boosted, in addition to the other filters I put on. Let me see if we can hear the difference here. Give me a thumbs up for low D, down below the comment, likes button, whatever. Maybe E flat. This is bass track. So you might be able to hear a slight difference.
This thing called love. This thing called love. Lift you up, it can hold you down.
So, again, right here what we have is pretty standard bass thing. I do duplicate, as you can see, there's quite a bit of blue stuff here. I do duplicate my bass tracks. If you just had one, it would work. It just doesn't pack quite the same punch, I think. So if you have this...
Ever since time that there's ever been.
It's alright. It passes. It depends if you're doing massive songs. I've had up to 10 basses going at the same time. Actually, you'll see that in a little bit. For the majority of the song, I keep it to 2 or 3. Also, another interesting little tidbit, I have an octaver track going, which adds a lot of depth. Let me actually show you what this sounds like here. So this is a regular bass track. This is a bass octaver track. What? And I actually have it going quite a bit throughout this.
6 + 6.
Just to add that little bit of depth.
200. Lift you up.
So I like this you up thing I did, so.
You up, you down.
So I started, that's 1 and 4. Scratch that.
You
1,
you down.
pretty simple there. Then in here I added the 9 and the other whatever.
You up, you down.
Just a little spice stuff in there.
Lift you up, it can hold you down, Take your world and turn it around.
Very nice.
Ever since time, nothing's ever been found. Ever since time, nothing's ever been found stronger than ba ba ba. Since time, nothing's ever been.
Again with the call and response here, and it's pretty much the same. It's just a little bit different. So
Nothing's ever been found stronger than ba 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 ba.
then here I added just a little bit just to differentiate it, make it a little more interesting.
Ba, ba.
And it's right there. So I have this little, it sort of branches out. So I start out really front in the ear, then it goes actually to the back. See if you can hear that.
Ba,
Whoops. So we have,
ba, ba,
yeah, so,
ba, ba, ba,
yeah, it's a little funky, I gotta admit.
ba, ba, ba.
So that's what I did there. And again, with this, I had snaps in there too. And again with the D chord.
Some men are like me.
This is by far, I don't know why, I just really like it. So,
Some men are like me.
men are like me. So this is another example where everyone's singing the same words.
Some men are like me.
So we have that. Then we have, let's actually go from the bottom. So we have,
Some men are like me. Some men are like me.
so then we add this.
Some men are like me.
So now we have the
men are
full
like me.
triad. So then what's this?
Some men are like me.
That is the major 7 right there,
Men are like me.
which I figured I should just add a little touch of that in there. Then up here we have something.
Some men are like me.
Yeah. Then up top,
Some men are like me.
I believe we have the 9.
Some men are like me.
Yeah. So up here we have
Men are like me.
pretty quiet. Here we have,
Men are like me.
then we add this.
Some men are like me.
Then with that extra little oomph here. Yeah. So then we end up with,
Some men are like me. They worry and doubt. Trouble their minds day in and day out. Too busy with the living to worry about a thing called.
okay, let me preface a little bit. Throughout the song, we have one time signature change and one key signature change. Well, technically 2 because it changes back, but you get what I'm saying. So, how and why and when? I typically like to change keys a little bit. I didn't want to stay in D the whole time, so I modulated up a half step to E flat. And the way that I did that was within this little call and response thing where it's going ba 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 ba. I decided to maneuver around a little bit until I just found my way into a nice big healthy chunky E flat chord. And the way I did that goes as follows. I'll let you listen to it. There we are. Now we're in E flat. That's pretty cool. How did I do that? I started by thinking of the bass track. I usually do that. That's what I did here. So what we have is a little interesting. It's a little different than before. So I sort of wrapped my way around the circle of fourths, if you will, I guess you could say. So we start with that C, which is already the dominant 7 to D. So that's another D. So now we're kind of going back, but it's not quite the same. So we go that right there, that C sharp or D flat now is the first instance where it's now. So we've worked our way up and then back down to where now we're a half step up. I'm not really great at explaining how I thought of that. It just sort of came to me. I was like, how do I do this. Then I thought of proper harmonies to go along with that. So I thought of the bass, then I thought, well, you know. Then I guess it's more crucial right here with the other things that are going along with that. So yeah, there's quite a bit going on up here. So basically just trying to sink down in a chromatic fashion while going from D to E flat. Not only that, as if that wasn't enough, I decided to go into 5/8. That's why this section sounds a little weird. If you heard the song, if you've heard the arrangement, you didn't quite know what was going on here. It is a little bit different. 5/8 is a little different than 4/4, just a little. So we go from obviously. So immediately after we get to that E flat chord, it switches to 5/8.
Then I see a mother's tenderness, and she holds a young one close to her breast, and I thank my God this world was blessed by a...
That is what it is. So basically I did this. Why? Why not? So based on here, what we have, I started with a bass track again. I wanted to have sort of a complex thing going on, so I have a 3 and then a 2, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead of just that, it's actually ends up being 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Then I harmonize that, as you do, justly tuned, of course. So I have that going.
This world was blessed by...
So I have that in the background. Then everything else is directly harmonizing with the melody, which I figured I'd do for the last verse.
Then I see a mother's tenderness, and she holds a young one close to her breast, and I thank my God this world was blessed by a thing called love.
So pretty standard here. There's not too much crazy stuff going on. We have the standard melody here.
Then I see a mother's...
Then I added this, which is...
Then I see a mother's tenderness, and...
which is the 5th. Then I also wanted to have the 3rd in there.
Then I see a mother's tenderness.
And then this one's just random stuff. I added the 9 in there.
Then I see a mother's...
So yeah, that's that. Then over here we have quite a bit going on.
By a thing called love.
We end on that E flat chord, which again is not, that's not a major 7. That's just a basic chord.
And see it with your eyes, hold it in your hand, like the wind it covers our land.
So this one's pretty similar to the last chorus. It's a little different because there's no dum 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 dum. The bass is just singing along with everything else. I knew I wanted to end on, which is fun because we're in E flat. That's the relative minor. I just thought it would be fun, y'all. And then I actually literally, this is the same harmony as last time.
Strong enough to rule.
I just shifted it up.
Strong enough to rule the heart of any man.
Then what we have here is the apex, the climax, the cataclysmic uptrend / downfall of this entire piece. So I ended this piece in a very interesting way. And I don't know if you guys have heard Jacob Collier's Moon River. If not, what are you doing? But he ends on this massive, not C chord. It's actually B half sharp, but it sounds to me a lot like C because my brain can hear half sharp. It just automatically associates it with the pitch above it rather than below. I don't know why, but we end on this chord. Thank you. you very much, and goodbye. That is a pretty massive chord, and it's honestly structured pretty similar to Jacob Collier's ending chord. In fact, if we go to very speed, which is an interesting little set, if we go minus half a semitone, that is not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Now I'm going to turn off very speed because we don't want the thing to be in half flat for the rest of the thing. We don't have 10 going. We do have 8 bass tracks going, which is just tumultuous. Yes, I know I skipped this part. That's we're going to get to that. So we have, I mean, that is just all around massive. So then what we add here is we have the 5th, which is just 5 going at once. That is just unbreakable right there. As Jacob would say, such a nice thing to do with a root is give it a 5th to be friends with. So then I believe this is the 3rd, which I also have quite a few of. Oh, okay. So we have the 3rd and also the 9 mixed in there too. There's a little more of that. So I wanted the 9 to be prevalent because that's how it is in the other thing. So what we have here, all these voices. Nice. Up here, here's what we have. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know you can hear this in there. Yeah, it's in there. Did I sing that high? No. I've actually sang a top C before. I couldn't the day I recorded this, and I was too lazy to do it. So what did I do? I went again to very speed, and I believe I shifted it down to 4 semitones. 4 semitones. 4 semitones. This is the actual note that I sang. No, it's not. I went plus instead. Whoops. This is the actual note that I sang. Guys, that's still pretty high. Give me a break. So this would actually sound pretty cool too. Fun fact, A flat is my second favorite key of all time. Then I shifted it back up, and of course you get the C. So, it's a very nice chord. It's got a lot of notes going at once. How many regions is this? That is 34 notes going on at once. If you recall, in Moon River, I think he ends with like 72 at once. So this is like half of what he's capable of. And well, I mean, not capable. I could have done more. I mean, it would have been overboard because this works just fine for me. It's fine. So we have this. We have this. Then, yeah, that's just a very rich full chord. Why did I decide to end on that? I'll get to that in a minute. First, let's take a look at this. What is going on here?
This thing called love.
What was that? Okay. Do you guys know what chordal harmony is? I hope you do. It's whoopsies. It's based on fourths. It's very fun to fool around with. I'm barely scratched the surface right here. This is literally just fourths. He actually does this a lot in Moon River too, so we start with this.
This thing called love.
That's what we've been hearing this whole time. Where is it? It's right here, isn't it? I know you are. No, that's not right.
The heart of it.
Well, I think I deleted where I showed up, but basically what we have here is we have fourths. If you go to the end, that chord is comprised of fourths. We have oh, sorry, I'm stupid. That's fourths. So we have so the fourth, then we have so we go all the way from a B flat all the way to a B. So there is quite a bit of dissonance, a little bit, you know.
This thing called love.
So that's how far we went. So How did I get there in terms of the melody? I knew I wanted to construct a chord in fourths.
This thing.
And interestingly enough, I get louder and more vibrato as it goes, even if you look at the waveform for this. I mean, so we start out pretty small with a little bit of vibrato, then we start getting crazy. So if we just have this, it's, yeah.
This thing called love.
So that's what that sounds like. And then so we have this, you know, I had a little bit of harmony in there too, you know.
This thing called love.
I pretty much constructed it in the same way. We have this thing called love.
This thing called love.
Which is what we've been hearing this whole time.
Thing called love.
Then I just went,
Thing called
I knew where I needed to land. I knew I needed to have so how do I land on well, you could go this thing called love, which is what I did.
This thing called love. This thing called love.
And similarly, I knew from here I needed to go so how do I land on that? Well, I could go this thing called love. So I literally just walked it down the entire time. So we have
This thing called
this thing
called
So if you look at it like that, it's not that complicated. It's really not. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Thing called this 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 thing called love.
So then, why did I choose to go from that to a C chord? I was considering doing an E flat chord, which would have sounded, I mean, it's the key that we were in before. It would have sounded like this. Pretty nice. Wouldn't have sounded quite that weird. I am on very speed. But I that's just one of two directions it could have gone. We have this B on the top, which is just begging to go from A to C. It's begging to be resolved to a C in my brain. It wants to go up to that, kind of. Then, you know, all these other notes, I mean, you can hear. All these notes are begging somehow to resolve to part of a C triad in my mind. It also could be going to an E flat. You know, you could have that would be E flat, but you could also go which is what I did. I know I'm very crude in demonstrating this, but that's basically, none of this stuff is super meticulously written down or planned. I hear it and I execute it as best as my current skill level will allow me to do. So I hear, to me, that is begging to go to a C. And that's what I did. And since Jacob had already done that in one of his songs, I was like, well, let me just steal that a little bit. I'm sorry. It really inspired me and I wanted to do it, and I felt like it would really close it out with a bang. Interestingly, I did also add a little bit of the 9 in there too, if you care to let me find it. That's not right. There we go. Isn't that pretty? So I added just a little bit of that B. Just see if you can find it. You can barely hear it, and you're not supposed to hear it. It's just to add that little bit of dissonance that, in the presence of everything else, just sounds pretty complimentary and just adds to the depth of the chord a little bit. So, guys, this is the end of my project. It's really only, it's not that terribly long, and that's it. How do you feel? I feel pretty hot. It's very hot in my room. I had to turn off all my fans for just for you guys. You're welcome. Another note about reverb, because I didn't mention it before. I do all my reverb through busing, which is when you select a track and you go to you basically send all of the tracks to a specific location where you can apply one filter in bulk to a lot of different tracks, so you don't have each track separately rendering its own reverb. You have them all sent to here. Since this is a very rhythmically complex song, not super complex, but it's fast, it's moving around. You want to be able to clearly hear all the parts. You don't want it to be too muddy. There's not too many tracks per vocal, really only 2 or 3 usually. And so I keep the reverb at a relative low. Let me show you. So this is what it sounds like. Whoops, I'm on the octave track. So it sounds like that. No, this is what it sounds like. The reverb is not extreme. In fact, I mean, you could go like, you know what I'm saying. You could go big, 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 big time. What am I doing? About a church. That's a lot of reverb, and that would not have really done. Maybe for like a big chord like this, it would work well. But then it would get really muddy really fast.
Some men are like me, they worry and doubt, trouble their minds day in and day out.
Again, it works okay.
To rule the heart of any man, this thing called love.
It's just in a rhythmically complex, clear song like this, I want to retain that clarity. And for that reason, my reverb was not, you know, too extreme. I just want to show you guys really quick what it looks like in the mixing department. This is what it looks like. It's basically this little option that you can open that allows you to, all of these yellow lines, the height of them represent the volume. So you can drag them up and down to your heart's content. You can mute tracks, you can manually adjust the volume as it goes, so you don't have to be fooling around with anything over here. As you can see, I do quite a bit of manual work to make sure that everything is very clean. I typically do this as I go along. Some people do the entire project without it, then they go through and clean everything up. I just kind of like to work as I go, and that's that. So you can see, without it, I would have a lot of random noise with tracks closing down and making noises
Rise, hold it in your hand. Like the wind, it covers our land, strong enough to
You
rule
can see
the
where
heart
I
of
need to make it back off a little bit. When the higher vocals come in, I can do that. And that applies just throughout the entire song. The mixing is very important. I just didn't want to get too into that because that's a whole nother ball game. From conception to birth, and by birth I mean posting, was well under a month. It took me, I would say, maybe around 3 weeks. And I was lollygagging a lot towards the end, so that's that. That is that. I know this is my first of hopefully many breakdown sessions where I'm really going to get in the groove and figure out what I'm doing, because I know this might have been a little bit of a mess. As always, I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of this channel, a part of my life. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you want to see from me or hear from me, and I will do my dang darndest. As always, stay safe, stay healthy and happy to the best of your ability, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.